I don't see how video game graphics could get any better than they are now. Okay, that sounds not just hyperbolic, but definitely completely untrue, and very naive. But it really feels like it, doesn't it? And I really believe it. I don't think game graphics can look better than this. Video games have come a long way since the medium's inception. I don't think it's necessary to break down the whole history or anything, but it is obvious just by looking at this footage that, well, games are really pretty now. But of course the present era of games is always going to have the best graphics there have ever been, because it is the best graphics have ever been. It's always easy to say that we couldn't have it any better than we do now because we don't even know what better would look like. And of course, innovation is not going to stop now. Games will keep pushing the boundaries of what we think can be accomplished graphically for the foreseeable future, but I think there is an actual difference between today and any other time in the past. It's just becoming increasingly obvious that graphical improvements are kind of plateauing, and the push for greater fidelity is becoming less and less impressive, and it's also becoming more taxing on the development side. We often measure how good a game looks, or at least the potential of how good a game can look, by how realistic it looks. And we are coming increasingly close to that goal of realism, climbing our way out of the uncanny valley one step at a time. During the reveal of the PlayStation 5, we were still in the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, and all of the presenters were filming from home with the same equipment and setup in order to create a more cohesive feeling for the presentation. This uniform lighting and look across all their faces, coupled with the opening slide stating that all game footage moving forward was captured on PlayStation 5 systems, made many people, myself included, wonder if these presenters were being rendered with the power of the PS5. It sounds really silly, but it wouldn't have been the first time there have been conspiracies like this, and human faces are a really great test of visual fidelity. It wasn't that far-fetched to think that they pull out the rugs from under us and say, everything was captured on a PS5, including all these presenters. But of course that wasn't the case. People had either misremembered or ignored the opening slide as it specified that all game footage, not all footage period, was captured on a PS5. And there's nothing else to actually suggest that these people were CG, other than the fact that from a technological standpoint, it seemed like a possibility. Time passed and Sony PR stated that the presenters were in fact just real people. It was just a straightforward conference like always. It was a funny event, but more importantly, I think a testament to where game graphics are that we would even consider it. The actual games Sony did show off were exactly what we expected, from a visual standpoint I mean. This goes for the next-gen games Microsoft showed off as well. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Forza Horizon 5. These games look great, they look fantastic, but that's it. Don't get me wrong, not every game using modern hardware is going to be on the same level of polish and visual fidelity anyway. Even games that are aiming for a similar style can look completely different, and of course certain developers and certain engines are better at certain things. A lot of the games in this B-roll are going for realism, yet they all look completely different. I've seen both Hitman 3 and the modern Resident Evil remakes in conversation for the best looking games of all time, but they don't look at all alike. So yes, it was cool that almost every game looked really good, but you just expect to be blown away at these shows. You expect to come away having just seen the best looking games of all time. These games may be up there on a technical level, but so were games on the PS4 and the Xbox One. These graphics just don't wow the way they used to. They look stunning, but we're just collectively numb to good graphics. We expect insanely good graphics at a minimum. This situation has always been inevitable. It follows the law of diminishing returns. Doubling the polygon count of a modern AAA game protagonist is nowhere near as impressive as it was for a PS1 and 64 era character. So it's not that graphics technology has actually been perfected, and it's not even that it's really slowing down. It's just at a point where whatever improvements may come feel incremental compared to what we've seen in the past. The idea that game graphics were plateauing really came into conversation around the last console generation. But those next-gen consoles, being the PS4 and Xbox One, were still touting their increased graphical capabilities as a major selling point. One reason why I think this time it's different is because game and console developers know this too. The 9th, latest console generation is not being marked by a huge upgrade graphically. The games do look better with few exceptions, and the first games of the generation are never indicative of the technology's full potential anyway, but the point stands. The 9th gen's focus is instead on higher resolution, higher more stable frame rates, faster loading speeds via solid state drives, and real-time ray tracing. All of these do help push forward the next-gen feel of the games, but even ray tracing, which is entirely related to how a game looks, isn't a monumental change for the players. It's an extremely important step forward, but devs have gotten so good at faking realistic lighting over the years that it's hard for the average person to notice the difference ray tracing makes a lot of the time. SSDs becoming standard hardware to work with is, in my opinion, the most next-generation feeling thing I've experienced on the PS5, and that has absolutely nothing to do with how a game looks. And finally, while it's not on consoles, yet anyway, the AI-based super sampling technologies like DLSS, FSR, and soon Intel's XeSS could potentially be huge for the industry, especially if it's leveraged in a consumer-friendly way as a means to have older hardware be able to keep up more. Now, these diminishing returns are not the entire reason that video game graphics are plateauing either. It's also about the state of the industry and the high cost of making games this graphically impressive. Making games is just getting more and more expensive, especially if you want to compete in the AAA space. We've seen companies try all sorts of gimmicks over the years in the form of DLC and microtransactions in order to try and better cover costs, and now video game prices are finally going up for the first time in over 15 years, at least on consoles. The scope creep in terms of content and graphics has gotten so ridiculous, and technologies to make development easier isn't enough to make it manageable. This is before mentioning crunch, of course. Many of the top developers in the industry are known for having toxic workplaces that encourage overworking and underpaying their employees. Support game developers unionizing. And these are usually the ones who produce games that will be in the conversation for being the most realistic or immersive. It's created the idea that crunch is somehow necessary for pretty games, or even good games, and that level of polish is always necessary in the first place. You can easily find people on the internet that unironically think overworking employees is okay if it means their new video game is shinier and more immersive, and there's bound to be at least a half dozen controversies over some minor aspect of a game's visuals every year. All of this, and much more that I haven't said, matters for reasons far beyond just how games will look in the future. More pressing is the sustainability of the industry in general, and the issues of workers' rights involved here. The games industry is in a weird place, as is the entire world. We are living in an incredibly unpredictable time in history, arguably one of the most unpredictable, and there's a lot of questions to which the answer is currently uncertain. What will come of the current political division and dissidence, particularly among young people? Will anything be done to combat climate change, and will civilization the way it exists now survive? Will AAA video games branch out from realism as their primary aesthetic? Yes, it is still a comparatively insignificant discussion, but I'm not dipping my toe into these heavier topics to wonder whether or not it's juvenile to make a video essay about game graphics in the wake of these topics. It's that these things are linked. The issue of games technology progressing is linked to the broader ones of the world by its inexplicable ties to capitalism. Though the quote didn't actually originate with him, Mark Fisher famously said in his 2009 book Capitalist Realism, "It is easier to imagine an end to the world than an end to capitalism." It's as true now as it was then. Capitalism doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon, but its constant and accelerating growth is concerning as there is no sustainable endgame. It's the reason there have been calls to action in recent years, like the now famous, "I want shorter games with worse graphics made by people who are paid more to work less," and I'm not kidding. And if the industry somehow did a 180 into that direction, I'd be perfectly happy, but that's not looking like a likely future. There's not an incentive to improve your product or your workplace for that matter, unless there's actually a financial incentive. And neoliberal capitalism is perfectly happy to eventually drive itself into the ground for the sake of short-term profit. Just look at how little even the supposedly progressive world leaders are doing to combat climate change. But anyway, this video is about video games. So, what can possibly be next? If it isn't already obvious, this video is a layman's perspective of the issue, and I don't know what's going on behind closed doors. But frankly, there are a lot of reasons to be pessimistic about the future of games. That being said, I do think there are some guesses we can make about what games might look like moving forward, and how we can tackle the issue of scope creep, beyond of course better worker relations and possibly even shorter games with worse graphics. The answer then is simple, right? Stop going for realism. Now, there are obviously lots of popular games that have art styles that are more cartoony, abstract, or even experimental. Indie games by nature are more stylistic because going for high fidelity is expensive. But in general, the industry breeds this homogeneous look in games, and with games tech getting more and more impressive, it's always made sense as a graphical showcase. So the majority of games still go for realism. Anyway, yes, I do think this is the way the industry should, and hopefully will, go. It not only makes sense, but in order to resist the ever-increasing development budgets, it may be necessary. I wouldn't say that making games with other art styles is just cheaper in every scenario, but there is one AAA developer we can turn to as an example for how it can be reasonably done: Nintendo. Nintendo has historically been working with older hardware, and now with the Nintendo Switch in the middle of its life cycle, it's over a full generation behind. And yet, it's on its way to being Nintendo's best-selling home console ever. They're most likely going to continue with their hybrid home handheld console for the next generation, and therefore the jump graphically could be reasonably big. Better technology, especially AI-based technology like DLSS, can make the tech leap that much bigger. You could say the same for VR, which requires more power to run, and the images being that much closer to your eyeballs needing to look better. So there are sects of the gaming world that have a ways to go to reach the level of fidelity the PC and next-gen console space is at. But the thing is, Nintendo has never cared about realism. I don't think it's fair to say they've never cared about how their games look though, because they've made some of the best looking games of all time. Their games hold up because they've always been insistent on experimenting with different art styles, and they often go for a childlike, toy-like aesthetic. It only makes sense that going for a more stylized approach will make the game stand the test of time better, as it can mask a lot of the techniques going into it, and there's not that standard of real life to compare it to. Yeah, a lot of their games could benefit from an upscaled resolution, and better technology could no doubt make the games look better where they made today, but a stylized game will almost always age better than one aiming to look like the real world. Jacob Geller has a great video on video game graphics. Well, two actually, but I'm specifically talking about How Does Mirror's Edge Still Look This Good?, which discusses how the 2008 game Mirror's Edge looks better than its contemporaries by aiming for something more slick and colorful than going for the popular gritty realism look at the time. That's not a Nintendo game, no, but the point is that games like this simply hold up better aesthetically. And he's right, the game looks great today. Nintendo also uses their lack of modern hardware to their advantage and makes bright, colorful games that age gracefully. They have to be more creative with their looks because the tech is already old. The most notable aspect here, though, is that their games sell, like, really well. Japan's work culture is already very different from the West's, and we don't hear about these stories of crunch and toxic work environments nearly as much, so it's hard to say if their workers are properly treated and compensated for these games, but it's otherwise clear that this avenue is an affordable, and, for the time being at least, sustainable one. I'd also like to mention something from a different medium that has challenged aesthetic norms. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This movie is only a few years old at this point, but it's already shown to be one of the most forward-thinking pieces of modern animation in countless ways that have already been talked about to death. While, like all art under capitalism, it is a product first and art second, it was still clearly a labor of love and a unique perspective in the wake of increasingly boring-looking mainstream children's films. It was a moment where critical and commercial success coincided, and therefore it's proving formative. While we haven't seen any true copycats due to its release being so recent still, we're seeing other movies have success pulling off new kinds of art styles. There's The Mitchells vs. the Machines, which does have some of the same crew behind it, and even animation giant Pixar is creating work that looks perhaps simpler than what they used to make, but no doubt just as expressive and much more stylistic. The cultures around these mediums are very different, and they definitely shouldn't be compared as much as they are, but I do think it shows that unique aesthetics can sell and even spawn a sea change in the industry. This very well could be the route that video games go. There's a whole world of untapped potential when being authentic to reality isn't the primary goal, and there looks to be an increasing number of high-profile games with more colorful art styles in recent years. And I've just been talking about 3D games the whole time. There's a host of absolutely gorgeous 2D games that are incredibly viable. There are still a lot of unresolved issues, and the industry is changing in more ways than the ones I've mentioned. I don't think I, nor anyone else, even anyone in the industry, has all the answers. But with everything in mind, I maintain that moving away from realism makes sense from every standpoint and could be a natural evolution of the medium. I'm happy with how games look now. I personally wouldn't care if this is how they looked for the rest of my life, even as they evolve in other ways. Games will evolve though, and I'll probably change my mind. Maybe games from this generation will age as badly as some games 20 years ago did, and maybe all video games will look like Return of the Obra Dinn or Super Mario Odyssey. It's an unprecedented situation where it's almost impossible to come up with an idea for a game that would be held back by modern technology, and your guess is as good as mine where the tech and the trends will take us. No matter what happens, it's remarkable we got to where we are today, but I do hope things get a lot better, and aesthetically a lot more diverse.